Religion is a huge part of who we are as a nation. Many of our beliefs are anchored on religious teachings, and it's been a tradition of Filipino families to participate in religious events all year round. Now, we've got the Translacion during Holy Week, we've got fiestas, so on and so forth. For Catholics, there are yearly celebrations of Translacion and all sorts of other fiestas. And this year is even more meaningful for the Christian faithful as we celebrate 500 years since the arrival of Christianity in the Philippines. So joining us live now via Zoom is church historian Dr. Paul Dumol. Now, he's a full professor of the humanities, I should say, at the Department of History of the University of Asia and the Pacific College of Arts and Science. Good morning, Professor Dumol.
Good morning, Paolo.
Now,
Yes.
Professor, you've been part of this webinar on the 500-year celebration of Christianity here in the Philippines. How significant is this for the Christian faithful?
Well, let me answer from the point of view of a historian, not as somebody who's representing the church. It's important for us because in the process of evangelizing us, the missionaries grouped together barangays around a centrally located barangay in which they built the church. And these were the foundations of our pueblos, which we know as our municipalities. And today, many of them are cities. The missionaries rather, had founded around 850 to 900 of them. And if you take a look at them at the map, Luzon and Visayas, they are the spine of modern day Philippines. It's where they were the first civic communities. The reason why I'm saying that is because before the pueblos, all you have are barangays. And barangays, as we all know, are kinship units. Magkakamag-anak po ang lahat ng mga nakatira dun sa barangay na iyon. So the pueblo is the first community where you have various families interacting with each other. Now, we call this in Tagalog, mga bayan, and I don't think it's an accident that we call the nation bayan.
Right.
That's one point of significance. The other one, I would say, regards the family. We are very proud of being a family-centered nation. But in my research about the pre-Hispanic family, the family was not defined by parents, but rather by the male, the father. And it did not matter how many women he had because the family was his progeny. And since we're talking here about datus who lived in barangays, the other women, of his women, only one was the wife. The others were probably women living in the same house who were also almost certainly related to him, different degrees of consanguinity. And he had access to all of them. It was only to the one who was the official wife that he had certain duties. Now, when Christianity came, the fuzzy boundaries of what the family was were defined. And that's what we have now, yung sa labas at yung nasa loob. No?
Right.
Third significance, I would say, comes from the Synod of Manila, 1582. This was a synod that weighed against all the abuses committed by soldiers, by alcaldes mayores, by encomenderos, from 1571 up to 1582, the first 10 years of Spanish colonization. Those were years of misery. And this campaign of the synod, which was led by the missionaries, mostly Augustinians and Franciscans, was so successful that to them I trace the concept of justicia or katarungan that we have in the Philippines. The Tagalog word for justice is katwiran. But you know that this is also a word that's used for reason or argument, because it is the Filipino concept of negotiated justice, which you're very familiar with if you're caught by a traffic policeman. But the concept of justicia is a non-negotiable justice. Now, early 20th century, you have Tagalog purists like Lope Casantos, where we can't have this Spanish word in our dictionaries. So they borrow a word from Cebuano and create the new Tagalog word of katarungan.
Right. It's a fascinating study of history and Christianity in our country. And really, it does require, it would be nice to sit down and talk about it endlessly. But Professor, we are, we have sort of rolled with the times and rolled with the punches, so to speak. The Catholic faith has certainly, the Christian faith has certainly gone through a few challenges. What would you say are the biggest challenges in this day and age for the Christian faith here in the Philippines?
I say the biggest challenge is the ratio between priests and parishioners.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, I understand that the ratio is one priest for 8,000 parishioners.
Mm-hmm.
That is monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Cardinal Tagle thinks that the correct ratio is 1 to 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a problem we've always had since the beginnings in the Philippines. But because of it, there is a fair amount of, well, the word maybe is not nice, ignorance about what real church teaching is. And this has spawned syncretic movements, the Colorum sects and so on. It has also spawned certain types of folk Christianity which are valid, like the Translacion. You mentioned that.
Yes.
There are some people who complain a lot about them. No? Well, that has to be addressed.
Right.
Because until people know very clearly what the teachings of the church are, well, you're going to have, in quotation marks, mistakes. I think it's time for the laity to step in.
Right. It certainly sounds like something that those who practice the faith should really be sort of putting into literal practice.
Yes.
It's a very, very fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for sharing what you have with us
My
this
pleasure.
morning. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning here on New Day, Dr. Paul Dumol from the University of Asia and Pacific. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.